Yep, I can share that.
All right, here we go. We're going to be kicking off this live stream. Thank you all for joining us. So, hello everyone. My name is Timothy Ichiyasu, aka Sky FPV, here at Street League Drone Racing, and I am joined today by the wonderful Stephen Kanabe. Got that one right this
There,
time.
yeah, you got that time.
I love it. And we're going to be going over the state of the spec today. Talking about, well, this will be essentially a little bit of a recap and catching up to where things are with the spec today. We're always changing things. We're always adding different aspects to the spec. We're always making sure that it's as good as it can be. And so we're here to talk about how that has affected the spec and what we've changed, what we've kept the same, how things have been going from our perspective at least. And our goal with these live streams is to get a really good idea of how things have been going from the pilot's perspective. So we like to try to put out the information, get everybody caught up. And then our big thing is that we really want to hear as much feedback as we can about, what they're expecting. So, let's go ahead and see if we can get into it. It looks like we lost our Discord stream, unfortunately.
I'm back. Sorry about that. I did a
Love it.
goof.
Oh no.
That's fine. Got this.
Cool, there we
There.
go. Love it. Alright. So, we got some show notes in the description, so you guys will have kind of an idea of where we're going with this. But first off, Steven, let's go ahead and talk about Cali Clash. How was Cali Clash from your perspective? Because you were both a race director, but you also flew as a pilot. So how did it go from your perspective?
Dude, Cali Clash was awesome. Like, we had such a cool field, and all the pilots were like, it took everyone a little bit to get warmed up, and then all the pilots totally got it. There were so many discussions about like, oh, and then because of the points format, we should fly like this, and people got it kind of. So like, I think everyone had a lot of fun, and the Street League race went super well at Cali Clash.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, we talk about our format so often, but really it's a very new format in regards to drone racing. I think it's something that people are taking a little bit of time to like understand fully, but then once they get it, they're like, oh my gosh, this is how it works. This is why all the races are so close. So that's something I think you and I are both pretty proud of.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely, for sure. When one of the I think I was in the A heat pretty much all day, and especially towards the end of the day, we're sitting down and everyone's going, all right guys, we just got like, go fast, keep them up, keep the quad in the air, no mid airs.
Yeah, it was
And,
interesting.
like,
You guys kind of had a little camaraderie going up there in the A group.
exactly. The A group was a lot of like fast guys, but not the absolute fastest, but like just the people who didn't mess up all day. And then the B group ended up with SFPV and Miwo and Amari and like all the really elite pilots who had made mistakes that day and were clawing their way back. Ended up in B group. So all the A group guys are like, we don't want to be down there. We want to be right where we're at.
Yeah.
We still had some really good racing though, just clean racing, which was cool.
Yeah, a lot of thought put into passing, which I think kind of comes back to the some of the things that I think we've done really well, which are just like the format, the speed of the quads. But we did have a really exciting realization just before the race actually, and it was that we kind of goofed up. We were kind of expecting the sticker spec to be a little bit closer than it was, and then we realized just like I think the day before the event that there was a big enough difference between what was labeled on people's motors and what the actual RPM was, to where when people had to do motor RPM limiting, they would be at a slight disadvantage. And so we wanted to make sure that wasn't the case. And so we ended up actually having to add a motor output limit for the pilots who were running the quote-unquote ideal spec motor, which is our brother hobby 1250 kV. And really anything 1250 kV is considered the ideal spec.
Yeah, so in our last rulebook update, I think that was when we made this change. We changed from a kV spec to a strict motor output, or not motor output, RPM spec. The RPM is really what matters. So whether you get there through motor output limiting or you get there with the kV, there's a maximum RPM that you're allowed to hit.
Right.
And we came to this race with many more tools where we had done spin up motor spec checks before or oscilloscope tests, but we kind of did it manually just using Betaflight. And at this event, we actually had some tools to be able to do these things quickly. So we're like, all right, we got all this stuff set up. Let's just do a shakedown run just the night before, make sure everything's working well, make sure there's no bugs in the code. And we spin up some spec motors, some 1250 kVs, and we went, oh my God, why is the number wrong?
Yeah, it's about 30 kV wrong, I think is what we came up with.
Yeah, and we're like, is it our code? Is it this? And then I pulled up all my oscilloscope data, and that is kind of just what motors run. Typically the sticker, from at least from the tests I've done, and my testing methodology, using an oscilloscope or using Betaflight, usually they say plus or minus like 2% kV, but really it's like +2,
right,
or +4. They don't really go under the sticker, which makes sense just from a marketing perspective for the motors.
You don't want to sell somebody a motor and have them say, why is it slower than what I expected?
Yeah, but if it's a little extra fast, no one's gonna say anything.
Yeah.
But we realized because we were using this strict RPM spec and we were going to be spinning up motors, oh no, people are going to start failing who didn't mean to fail, who aren't. There's nothing nefarious going on. They just didn't know.
Right.
So we rewrote all of our presets and stuff, and we tested all the motors we had in the house, which we had pretty much every motor someone was gonna use at the event, just in our Airbnb. And we more or less figured out that every single motor, excluding Eco 2s, that's a different thing we'll get to,
yeah, we'll get to
are
that later,
about 5% hot.
Yep.
At least in motor output limit, what you need to motor output limit to meet the spec.
Right. So basically their sticker spec was 5% slower than what the motor would actually measure on the bench, which is enough to fail a spec check.
Yeah, our spec check is sensitive, definitely down to 1%. So, yeah, you'd fail the test. We had spec quads that, like, I set up the quad, and it didn't meet spec, and I'm like, but I know how to set up a quad spec. I've made the presets. I'm in all of these discussions, so it was a little bit like, oh no, what do we do? And yeah, we just made the call that, like, we figured out what everyone's motor output limit needs to be, and we flashed that to every single person's quad that morning with 0 failures.
Yeah, so something, for those of you who've not been to a Street League race, part of our check-in process, I think a lot of other racing has this as well, where, you know, you'll go up, you'll check in, and they'll have you do, like, maybe a video output power test, stuff like that. Like, I know Multi-GP Champs has done that in the past, where they're actually verifying that your VTX is within the output limit. So we do a very similar thing at Street League, except for because our spec has some software stuff in it, we're essentially plugging in a USB, and we've written some pretty awesome code that can actually not only read whether or not the quad is currently set to spec based on what motors you have, but it can also set your quad to meet the spec. And so then we can kind of know going into the event, like, okay, you checked in, which meant that we verified your settings are definitely good. So if your settings are different and they're out of spec when we check you during racing, well, then we know that we've got a problem. But we give all of the pilots the best opportunity to actually succeed at meeting spec. And so we kind of take it upon ourselves where if somebody didn't meet spec for some reason, but it was us that last set their settings, well then it's on us. But if they've changed their settings and made it not spec, then we know it was either intentional or negligent. And at that point, we'll DQ your last round, and you have the opportunity to fix it going into further rounds. So that's kind of what we did going into Cali Clash. We had some really good feedback from our pilots saying, hey, like we should actually be more strict about making sure that people are actually following the spec and proving that they're following the spec. So I think we did pretty good in terms of following through and making sure that the racing was even more fair than it was in Citrus Springs. So I'm kind of stoked about that, and I think in the future we have ways to make it even more convenient than it was, but I think we'll kind of keep that tight to our chest for the time being, because it's kind of fun, I think, for the pilots to show up and be like, oh my gosh, this is like, one of the best compliments we had was SFPV was like, oh my gosh, this is like the Formula One of drone racing. And that was a really big compliment coming from such an accomplished pilot, somebody who has done so many big leagues and races and stuff like that. Like he knows what really competitive drone racing looks like. So for him to give us that compliment and make that statement that meant a lot to me, and I know it meant a lot to both Steven and Josh, who put so much work into this. So I'm kind of stoked for the future of some of our technology for the spec.
Yeah, it was like the number. I know Z-Stone's going to be upset about this, but the number of spec checks is not going down.
It's only going up, baby. They only go up.
They only go up. But we're working really hard to make it even faster than it was last time. And like we were pretty good last time. I was definitely we were random spec checking all day. I don't think we got to all the pilots, but we got to a lot of them, over half the pilots. At least randomly spec check.
Yeah, and I believe we checked every single pilot in the Elite 8 after every single heat, if I remember correctly.
Yes, we did that as well. So, so we're just going to optimize that a little bit so we can do it even faster. And, but besides that, the spec checking went great. And it's important to do, not because we're like really trying to catch somebody, like we think everyone's out to get us kind of thing, but it can make anyone who shows up at the event can be comfortable that they are doing everything in their power to make sure that this race is fair for me. And I don't care if you're in the Elite 8 or you've been winning every event or you're just trying to get your quad in the air all day. It's important that the race is fair for you.
Yeah, and so, I dread the day where spec racing has a bunch of people who are like suspicious of weird little tricks and stuff like that that other pilots might be doing that would maybe tempt them, where if you have this perception that everybody else is cheating, I think that creates an environment where more people are likely to cheat, and so it becomes like a self-perpetuating problem. So I think it's good that we're kind of jumping on top of things ahead of time so that that's not an issue. But maybe that's something we'll have to tackle in the future. I don't know. I know spec pilots and a lot of our top tier pilots obviously are working as hard as they can to be the best pilot they can be, and they're working to build the best gear they can build. And so I think that we're gonna run into some issues in the future where like, okay, someone's gonna get banned at some point, someone's gonna get rounds deducted. But I am happy to say right now we have yet to catch anybody who we believe was doing anything nefarious. The only times we've dropped points was for things where it was so obvious that it wasn't spec, that it was pretty certain they hadn't, that it was unintentional. So I'm pretty stoked for that.
Yeah. I all the pilots have been like really good about like as much as it's a little bit complicated and setting everything up, the pilots are pretty stoked on it. So when we show up somewhere, pretty much everyone knows what's going on. We're not really coaching people through the spec on the day of the race.
Yeah.
honestly, usually there's one or two guys. Usually it's two, because you got to see the quads race before you jump all in. But who are super into it, and then they get everyone else into it, and like, so we're seeing these little like beacons of like, this is the guy who's kind of heading up the spec in this area.
Amari says complaining about spec checks is grounds for a spec check. I think he just got himself a new rule in the rule book.
If you bitch about a spec check, we spec check you twice,
Yeah,
and I will steal your quad to spec check you.
Okay, so do you want to tell the story, or shall I?
Yeah, I can tell the story. So, Miwo was like right after finals, like he had to go. He had work the next day, and he had a long drive or whatever. And after finals, I like the last race, he's packing up his gear. I'm like, Miwo, I need your quad. And he goes, no, you spec checked me 5 fucking times. I don't care anymore. Stop it. I haven't changed anything, which is true.
Context,
literally,
he just got 3rd place. He's like on the podium.
Yeah. So yeah, he's getting spec checked every round. It's ridiculous. And he's just like, yeah, I physically don't have time to change anything. What are you trying to catch? And it's like, dude, trust me, like, I don't want to do it anymore than you want me to do it, but I got to do it. And he was like, no, I'm packing up my shit, disqualify me. And I said, no. And I took his quad and I ran away.
Plugged it into the computer, ran the spec checker, and then ran it back to him.
Yeah, I figured if he's packing up his car, I could throw the quad in last thing, right?
Yeah, he was a good sport about it afterwards, but it was pretty hilarious. Just you guys' comical back and forth. But yeah, spec checking, that's something I think we're going to make pretty regularly, and we're definitely going to make some tools to make it quicker so that it's more of like, you know, it should be nearly as simple as putting your quad on the podium. And so I think, you know, we'll be moving in that direction in the future.
So everyone who's got those USBs that are like technically accessible, but they're kind of a pain in the ass, please fix it.
Yeah, you're
make it
definitely
easy.
Gonna want to fix it for yourself, honestly, because it's gonna be the difference between getting to fly in an official race and just tearing your quad, you know, apart several times. USB accessibility will be a pretty big thing going forward.
Yeah, I think we found some like extension cord things that we're gonna. I think those might be something we add to the store or something like that. Just something where it's like no excuses. We have these. Plug it in, zip tie it to the side of your quad.
Yep, pretty easy. But yeah, Cali Clash was super awesome. The racing was really amazing. Amari absolutely killed it as usual. I didn't think he was gonna do it again there at the beginning, but he freaking did it again. And he beat out some of the best pilots in the country to do it yet again. So it was a really awesome race to watch. We have the live stream hosted on our channel, I believe, if you want to go rewatch it. And then SFPV got 2nd place, and Miwo got 3rd. So congratulations again to our podium from Cali Clash. You guys were absolutely amazing to watch all night long. That was a real pleasure getting to watch you race.
Yeah, it was fun chasing them. I had nothing for those top 3 guys.
Yeah,
but,
you finished out 4th, right?
I did. I got number 4, and I'm super proud of that. It was really a toss up between, at least in my semifinal, it was me, I think Z Stone, Din, and Orange Stuff. And it was SFPV, me, Din, and Orange Stuff. And between me, Din, and Orange Stuff, it was a toss up. We were starting that last race, no idea who's gonna win this, and it was the best. I had fun flying against those guys all day.
Oh yeah. It's a good time. There was much good DVR. We actually went back to our Airbnb and literally we just watched our DVR and we're like yelling at the TV like, oh my gosh, because there's so much good racing to watch back. So yeah, that was Cali Clash. It was a really great time. And huge shout out also to the landowner, I believe,
Bruce?
Greg? Or Bruce.
It's Bruce. Yeah, it's Bruce.
Bruce, and also a huge shout out to Colby for putting on Cali Clash every single year. Yeah, it was.
And shout out to Griff for reaching out too.
Oh yeah, Griff.
Because like without Griff reaching out, that race never would have happened.
Yeah, we were, I think we were being a little shy with like, we definitely don't want people to feel like Street League is like coming in and taking over an event that, really we just want to co-host. Um, our goal is just to add more value to it. So, I'm pretty sure that they had a pretty good time doing Street League. So I think it was worth it, and I hope that they feel the same way.
Yeah, definitely. I think the race directors for the event, like we were like, okay, there's one day we're taking over. We're gonna do it all just fly, guys, and I think they enjoyed that too.
Yeah, because a lot of people who put on events want to actually get to enjoy the events too. So
that's why you're flying this weekend. I'll run the timer. Get your quad in the air.
All right, I got a new quad I'd like to test out anyways, so we'll make it happen.
Hell yeah.
So moving on, we've got some pretty exciting announcements coming up. So the first one is our store is ramping up. We're going to start working really hard on stocking things in the Street League store at streetleague.io. And we realized not many people knew that we were even selling products. So we have been trying to stock a lot of the products that we see pilots buying and see pilots really enjoying. But it's 2022, so we can't stock everything, but we're slowly growing, and we've got the store with our first set of frames. So I think you've got a really beautiful frame that you could show off on the live stream to show off.
I was halfway through building it, but I have a similar one on my desk. I think I'm gonna save that special one for when it's totally finished.
Okay, that's fair.
But this one, I actually made this as the first Street League bind and fly. So if you find me at IO and you're like, hey, I don't have a Street League drone yet. Street League drone.
Oh, baby.
Ready to go. Or if more likely one of the local pilot's going to grab it off me.
Yeah, so go ahead and show that drone off too, because that is a Cali frame. That is designed by Imperius.
No, it's designed by Cloud 10. It's by Alex Dunda.
Cloud 10, Alex Dunda, with a lot of input from Imperius. And
yes. So they made the original version. Imperius is a big supporter of the Stretch X frame design, which I actually fly the Cypress open class quad, which is a Stretch X, and I love it. So I saw this frame that Imperius was flying, and I'm like, that's awesome. I think with the flip up to access your stack, it's 2 bolts to access everything in the quad, and I was like, I think I want this frame. And then I tried it for springs, and I could not handle the Stretch X heat. You just got to fly it different. And I was like, you know what? I want the frame, but I want an X. So we went and talked to Alex at Cloud 10, and we said, hey, can you make an X version of the Cali so we could stock it in the store? And he was like, yes, of course, let me do it. And he came up with this. It uses the exact original Prig arm, or an arm that's compatible with that. He actually redesigned the Prig arm to make it easier to machine, and it's one less tool change.
Better too in general for fitment.
Yeah, it fits a little nicer. So that actually all of the arms we stock in the Street League store, and there will be more coming, are Cali arms, which you can use Prig arms on the Cali, and you can use Cali arms on the Prig. If you try to mix the 2 arms together, you have to do a little filing, but not too bad. And so this is the Cali. It's got this cool canopy, and it uses a chin mount GoPro camera, but I don't run a GoPro, so there's not one on here.
You already got that HD, the HD0.
I got that HD0. So this is the first frame that we're stocking in the store. And they're for sale right now. I think I have 4 of them. I think there's 4 of them in stock right now. I got to go double check the stock, but the website deals with that. So if it's for sale on the website, it's in stock and you can purchase one right now, and they're retailing for $90, which is great. We managed to come in just under a Project 399 Prig.
Yeah.
Which was kind of our goal.
Yeah, right now we consider that kind of like our premium frame price. We don't really want anything to go above 100 unless it would have to be really crazy to go above 100, and this frame is already really crazy in terms of like the quality and the performance too. Like we found that it is ridiculously fast compared to just the stock prig. So
yeah, I don't want to call it Toker CNC because his frames are more than that, but he cuts them out of super crazy special carbon.
That's true.
So that's why his frames are more expensive. But you do get my original prig frame is from him, and he does full weave.
More indestructible.
Yeah, full weave American-made carbon is just crazy stuff. But we got it made overseas, and we saved a little bit of money. But the other thing, so we were stocking hyperlights, and everyone loved them. You can see this quad has hyperlights on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll probably keep hyperlights in stock a little bit, but not as our main motor. Pyro does a really good job of keeping those in stock, even though our Street League pilots sold them out, which is kind of cool. They definitely noticed, but we're cooking up some stuff with motors right now.
Yeah, so, we know a lot of people have really liked our branded motors in the past, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if our next batch of motors is something special.
Yeah, we're out here, we're making inquiries, we're trying to make it happen, and we're going to try to find a really sick motor for you guys.
Yeah, in general, I think that's something that I think a lot of people, maybe don't know about us initially, is that we are trying to be as much for the different brands as possible. So like if you're a sponsored pilot, oh, that dog needs some love.
I know.
But yeah, if you're a sponsored pilot and you have a brand that supports you and you'd like to help them, put them in touch with us. We'd love to make sure that their gear is able to be used in Street League, because that's one of the big things that we think is really important in this hobby, is not only brands supporting pilots, but also pilots being able to support their brands. And so we try to make that as easy as possible. So let's see, what's the next thing? So I think at this point we're ready to get into. Well, let's see. Do we want to get into the tech check, or do we want to talk about some of the stuff we have coming down the pipe?
Let's leave the live spec check and kind of unveiling the tool that we're hopefully going to be released to you guys soon, kind of for the end.
Okay.
So talk about some of this stuff coming down the pipeline first.
So yeah, one of the things that we ran into in Cali Clash, well, we've run into this just a little bit at every race, and we kind of constructed the rule book in such a way where pilots were really incentivized to try to make their quads really awesome to look at, and LEDs we feel like are a really big part of that. Well, we did a good job with that bit of it, and what we have started to realize is that LEDs can be a little bit inhibiting for the pilots behind you if they're bright enough. So we're trying to figure out what to do about that. And so we have a clause in the rulebook that I hate, but that I also wrote, and it was the best that I could come up with at the time. And so I'm kind of reaching out to the community to see what your guys' ideas are. Essentially, the rulebook currently states that LEDs must be of reasonable brightness, either too dim or too bright, and that is at the race director's discretion. And so like at Cali Clash, we had a couple of pilots say, hey, so-and-so's lights are too bright, and we ran over there with electrical tape, and we just tape up a couple of the LEDs, and overall you reduce the brightness. And that's sort of a band-aid fix, I feel like. I'd much prefer to have a more formal way of measuring LED brightness, considering that different LEDs have different efficiency, so you can't really go off watt limit necessarily. Measuring light output is really tricky on a non-uniform light emitting source like a drone with weird geometry and whatnot. So we're open to ideas to see if the community has any good suggestions. Otherwise, I think for now we've got the rulebook as it stands, and it's just kind of arbitrary how bright you can have your quad. But ultimately, the goal is like, hey, you shouldn't be blinding people and preventing them from seeing gates.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of I think pilots are starting to figure out what cameras handle that really well, and which ones don't handle it well. Because there was definitely times where people were like, oh, this dude's blowing me out, and it's like we look at their like 4 up live feed, and we're like, yeah, it is, but like you're the only one, dude.
Yeah, we did
your camera.
see the cameras come into play, and I think this is something for the pilots who have flown like night tracks, AZ night tracks. You know, they'll know that there are certain cameras you really don't want to try to fly those gates on. So for example, I'm not sponsored by them or anything, and we're not supported by them right now, but Foxier cameras, the Predator V5 seems to be the go-to play, and what our current season points leader is saying, like, that's what he always tells pilots. He's like, well, my video looks fine, and this is what I run. And he runs Amari runs the Foxier Predator 5, and he says he has a really good time with it. And Steven, you are running HD0. And
Yeah.
how's your experience been with that?
HD0 is like a cheat code for Street League, guys. It's like literally we're watching, like, what we've learned is I'm a little bit sensitive to bad video because I'm used to having perfect video all the time, where we're like watching, I'm like, oh yeah, I was having video breakup at this spot, and it like shows the DVR and there's a couple speckles, and everyone who's watched the video is like, are you kidding me? That's perfect. That's what you're complaining about? And I'm like, well, yeah, it wasn't perfect.
It wasn't perfect.
But like the HD0 feed is just, you can see everything at night, all the LEDs, even Miwo's crazy blue LEDs. Like, they were a little annoying, but they were not.
Yeah, you're still able to like see the gate ahead of you for the next, for the most part.
Yeah, I think I use the HD0 Micro V1. Presumably the V2 would handle it better, and I know the original Runcam Nano for HD0 is like, I use those for a little bit, and I wouldn't recommend that one though.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Maybe we'll have a list of like recommended cameras just to help people out, like, a list of cameras we know can handle LEDs, and like obviously you can run whatever you want, but this is what will help you the most.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a terrible idea.
It'd be good to have some pilot resources like that. Anyway, so that was one of the things coming down the pipe. And then the other thing that we wanted to kind of put to the community is we know there's a lot of really awesome Betaflight developers out there, and they put a ton of really great work into the software. And we're realizing that with assistance from one of them, we could do some really cool things with the spec that I think would make it super fun, and would also really help with some of the issues that crop up in all different specs, not even just ours. So the big challenge here, the big problem that we'd like to solve, is that we've noticed if you buy a brand new battery and you run that battery on the track, you're going to run faster lap times on that track than you possibly could have on a older battery, a battery that maybe you've been running for even like 3 or 4 months. Honestly, it just takes a couple of weeks for a battery to stop performing at the same level that it did when it's brand new. So
and when you're winning by 100th,
yeah, we have
the battery.
We have lots of battles in Street League that come down to us having to use camera data instead of timing data, because the racing is actually that close. And so batteries really start to matter, and so something we really don't want, that we've seen in every spec racing league so far, is pilots choosing to only run a brand new battery for really important races. And what that starts to do is that starts to price other pilots out of the competitive racing, and that's not something we're really a big fan of, because only so many people can afford to have brand new batteries, either every single race or even in finals. Like, that's what is that? That's 5 brand new batteries for finals, assuming you can even make it that far.
I think that extra 5% motor output limit that we started running actually did help with that, because now we're just putting a little bit less stress on our batteries. But yeah, definitely moving forward, because as of now, you can do really well in Street League on old batteries. In Citrus Springs, I made Elite 8 on batteries that were almost a year old at that time, flying them every weekend.
Yeah, a lot of those pilots had actually just bought their batteries, because a lot of those were pilots that were new to Street League. So
Yeah.
that was kind of interesting to see. So I
But
think we're doing pretty good.
yeah, we do pretty good, but definitely I got some new batteries for Cali Clash, and I flew both of them during point heats, and I noticed enough of a difference that I said, okay, my old batteries are my backups now. I'm flying new batteries.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's something, that was actually something we saw Amari do that I think caused him to win, or gave him the ability to win where he maybe didn't have the ability to win in Citrus Springs. He actually was paying attention to the internal resistance of the batteries. So anyway, all of this to say, the batteries and their ability to spin the motors up quickly, and their ability to spin the motors up to the desired RPM at all, is something that I think could be aided by something like a dynamic RPM limit in beta flight. So obviously there may be some tuning involved, there might be some techno wizardry, but I know that beta flight devs have done all sorts of really cool things, like what do they have? What is the feature where it reads the voltage?
Yeah, like VBAG, SAG, VBAT, SAG compensation.
Yeah.
So right now we use a throttle cap. Let's ignore the throttle cap for now.
Sure.
And a motor output limit, right? So it's basically telling the ESC you're allowed to use 90% of your power to power this motor right now. Where ideally what we would like to do is we would like to tell the flight controller, hey, you're not allowed to go above what's that RPM? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. It's 26,250 RPM.
Yeah,
which
that's our spec right now.
That's our spec right now. So that's a theoretical RPM, so this number would be different. But instead of telling the ESC, hey, you're only allowed to use 80% of your power, why don't we say you could use 100% of your power? I don't really care how much you use, but once you hit your maximum RPM, you stop.
Yeah. And
that's what we want. That would match all of our motors up really, really well. We wouldn't have to have different motor output limits for different motors. It would make it so that it's because the whole race right now, you're putting out, let's say 90% of power at full throttle. If we changed it so that was now at the beginning of the race, maybe it could do it on 80% power and get that RPM. And then at the end of the race, maybe it needs 100%, or maybe on the last lap you just barely start not being able to hit it, kind of thing. It would
now
make
an old battery is usable.
Yeah, your old battery will be able to sustain that RPM for the whole race.
Right, or be closer to it than it would have been otherwise. So like, for example, VBAT sag compensation doesn't prevent your quad from sagging out at the very, very end of the race. And so in a similar way, I think that this could be a way to make the field more level than it currently is, even if it's not like icy smooth. It's, still really great for racing, and still really great for the longevity of our equipment, because buying batteries is really expensive. It's one of the most expensive parts of this hobby, and so we think the work from a Betaflight developer would really help. So this is sort of our shout out, like, hey, Betaflight developers, we would love to have a dynamic motor output limit. That would be very cool. Kevin Turner asks, do the throttle caps need to be programmed in the radio or set in Betaflight? So for the spec, we require that the motor output and throttle limits be set in Betaflight. And the reason for that is because you could have somebody doing something sneaky where they have a little knob or something. But since we do Betaflight spec checks, where we actually pull the dump from your quad during official races, we can actually prove that somebody was in the spec. And so that just makes it a little bit more fair for everybody, or at least makes sure that we know that it was fair for everybody.
Yeah, and there's things like you can put throttle output on a switch, and that's something we check for.
Yeah.
So try to do it. If it's there, it's gonna throw a flag, and then we're gonna look at it and go, oh, you have one rate profile on a switch with a throttle cap, and the other one doesn't have a throttle cap, and we're gonna set the throttle cap on the other one too. So you could switch all you want, but there's a throttle cap on every single one.
Right. And obviously, if you're just hanging out in your backyard, as I know you love to fly in so much, do what you want. You can set it in the radio, and it's the 75% cap is effectively the same thing. And then if you have spicier motors than what the Spec is, you'll need to run more of a motor output cap. But that's up to you. And then if you come to an official race, we'll help you set it up and configure it in Betaflight if you need help. Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of what we have coming down the pipe. Anything else?
While we're talking about Betaflight, so I know Betaflight just hit RC7 for Betaflight 4.3.
Oh, yeah.
So guys, I know I am kind of part of this problem. Why we all started using RCs all the way back in, what was it, like September of 2021 or something. We got on 4.3 early. But once 4.3 official comes out, we as a spec are only going to be supporting official releases of Betaflight. So that would be 4.2 or 4.3 official stock from Betaflight. You flash it in the configurator, Betaflight.
Yeah, because we ran into some issues with that in Vegas.
Yeah, the dealing with the different RCs and which computer can we plug into which quad, and then this guy's having this issue, and there's fail-safe issues, and as much as I was part of the problem because I want to be on the latest and greatest, for official races, official versions of Betaflight, once 4.3 official comes out, we're gonna lock it in.
Yeah, cool. I think that's it for things coming down the pipe. Do you want to get into the exciting part of this live stream?
Let's do the exciting part of the live stream. Yes. All right. Hold on 1 second. I'm here.
So we're going to be giving you guys a quick sneak peek of some super secret software that we've been working really hard on. Josh has been doing the brunt of this, and we've been kind of hacking our way through it with Python scripts and stuff before that. But now we're doing it we're essentially using the Betaflight code base to do some cool spec checking stuff.
Yeah, so basically we have a version of Betaflight, and if you look right here, there's a spec check test tab, and you can go into the spec test tab, and hold on, oh, I did the thing I wasn't supposed to do.
Oh, just close it.
But that's okay. So, and this will let you run a spec test, just the way it is right now. So what you're gonna do is, let me switch back to my camera real quick. So down here, this is the output to it, but I have a power supply that puts out 24 volts very, very consistently. So you can do this with 12 volts, you can do this with 13 volts, you can do this at 21 volts. As long as you know the voltage, this test will work.
And the trick is to make sure that you have a relatively beefy power supply, because like a regular wall wart or something will not be up to the task. Even this power brick that I use for charging my batteries really doesn't like the back EMF that can come off of these motors. So we've made the spec tester specifically to try to make it a lot easier on the power supply you're trying to use.
So what we have is, and you should be able to run this on your Hoda or something. You put it in the power supply mode, but it's not really recommended right now.
Yeah.
So what you're gonna do is you're gonna plug in your quad, and you'll see up top it'll say 23.91 volts. That really means 24. This flight controller is not calibrated. You're gonna click I'm safe, and I'm gonna mute myself because the noise this makes is ridiculous. And you're gonna start the test, and I'm gonna switch to my camera after the test is started. Alright, so as you guys saw, it spun up my motors, it maintained them at a given throttle for a little while, and it gave me back RPM data. So it's taken hundreds of RPM samples over a period of time, and given me this average back. This is the average RPM that the motors were spinning for a given throttle and a given voltage. So now I have this information. So 12,954. And then
At this point, it's just a matter of doing a little bit of math.
That I made the spreadsheet to do for me. So,
and at some point, the spec checking tool will do all this math for us.
Yeah,
so that it's just super easy.
It's not even an alpha yet. This is dev release stuff. But
yeah,
you can see the motor output limit. It gives me 92.63%. So this would be 92% if I want to be safe, and maybe a 93% if I want to be a little bit spicy. So, but then it's, if I'm at a race and I get spec checks and we spin up your motors at a known voltage and a known throttle, and we check the average RPM out and it's too high, if I went up to 93, I might lose points. So maybe I want to stay at 92 on these. And you can see I've run the test twice. We get very, very similar results. The one thing we did notice is if I run this test over and over and over right now where my motors start getting hot, unintuitively, I'm not sure why this happens, but the RPM goes up.
Yeah, we did notice hotter motors produce higher KV.
Which makes no sense.
It effectively changes the KV of the motor. I didn't know that. We're not motor scientists, so we're learning all of this along with everybody else.
But at least experimentally, with the way we're testing, we know you want to do it with cold motors. So you want to do your first test. You don't want to test over and over and over until you get the number you're looking for, because your motor output limit will just keep going down. The other information that's pretty relevant is the new version of BL Heli actually reads a lower RPM back to you on the telemetry. We measured it, and it was about, on average, around 200 RPM at this. So if I was running, I think it was BL Heli like 32.7 or 8, this would say like 13,100 kind of thing. And if I update to Beta Flight, I think it's 32.9, whatever the most recent one, this number goes down. So
so we actually have in the chat Jack Nimble offering really helpful advice. He says hotter magnets get demagnetized, which effectively raises the KV. We have two really important things also in the chat. Jack Nimble says it might be handy to see all 4 motor values if you're making tools and all. Right now, the spec is your average motor RPM. And we were actually just having a conversation about that, and we have a really awesome section in our Discord specifically for discussing spec intricacies like this. So if you have a good opinion that you would like to share, go ahead and jump into our Discord. It's in the description below, and we really like feedback exactly like that. The highest motor RPM, the average, which one should we be using, stuff like that. And then Claymore says, quote, I might lose points. What does that mean? So the way we do it, Claymore, and I believe we have this laid out in the rulebook as well, is that if you're found not to be spec, you will lose the points for your previous round, for the most recent round that we suspect you were no longer spec for. So that's essentially how the rules work for that, and in general how our spec check works.
Yeah, so the last round that we can prove you weren't spec for. So that's why we do all of the random spec checks throughout the day.
Yeah, Amari's found a way to go higher KV. He's interested. Heat your motors. Actually, Amari, you were doing the wrong thing the whole time. You thought you wanted to cool your motors. No, you want to heat your motors.
Yeah, honestly, it makes no sense. I don't know why it does work the way it does, but it does work the way it does, and it's repeatable, and we've tested it a lot. So,
oh no, we found a meta.
Yeah, and different things like outputting. Well, what's the average RPM of each motor? Just because I'm curious. Like, that data is in here. It's just this is basically a dev tool for us to see if it was working correctly. So that's why it doesn't do the math for you and stuff. It's just us making this tool to see if it works, and it does. So hopefully we'll have a tool for pilots to use pretty soon.
Yeah, we're really working hard towards that. Is our end goal, is that pilots will have a tool that they can use to do all of this spec checking. But let's go ahead, and I'd like to walk through a little bit of a experiment though. Let's say, Led, I'm not the most intelligent guy, or maybe I don't have one of these things. I don't have a way to do all of that crazy spec checking.
All right.
Are there any good ways for me to be able to to make sure that I'm spec?
Well, yes, there are. I'm so happy that you asked that. So let me open. So the first and easiest thing for you to do.
So I got it up on the live stream here. Go ahead and walk me through this beta flight tab. Or if you want, just
You're not streaming to me.
Oh, unfortunate. Okay. Go ahead and do it while I do it, and I'll just follow your steps as you go.
Okay, so yeah, that I can do. I'm just gonna open up the standard version of Betaflight, because that's the one that I have my preset. Yeah, I gotta close this one.
Oh, watch me not be up to date on Betaflight. That would be unfortunate.
Classic. All right, here we go. So display 1. So this is the normal Betaflight. This is nothing with. There's no spec tab in this. So we're just going to connect. So the first and easiest thing that you should do is go to the presets tab.
It should be on the left, right?
Yes.
Oh no, I don't see it.
You don't have it? Oh no.
Hang on, let me load the other version. This will be the regular version of Betaflight, I think. Presets. I don't think that I have it. So let's go ahead. Why don't you do a screen share then? And
yeah,
I will.
I'm screen sharing right now.
We can walk away. Yep, perfect. All right.
All right. I'm gonna go up here to preset sources. I've already made this, but I'm gonna type in a name. I'm gonna name it Street League. I'm gonna type in this URL, which is available on our Discord, and I'm gonna type in this title, or really you're gonna copy paste it for PB Street League defaults, and you're gonna select the source. So I can go here. I can make this active. Or I can make this active. All right. And then if I type in street, you will find my PID Toolbox tune. You'll find the throttle cap, which this one's old, this one's going away, but the motor output limit settings. You click there, and it's gonna set your throttle boost, it's gonna set your throttle limit, and then it's gonna ask you to select your motor. So what motor are you running, Sky?
I'm running the Brother Hobby 1250 kV motor.
All right, so you can just select that right there, that checkbox. You're gonna click pick. You're gonna sit agree, and you're gonna hit save and reboot.
And just like that, I am now spec.
And just like that, you are now spec.
Let's go. So there you have it. Leadfingers did a really awesome job making sure that there is a way for people to easily make sure that their quad is spec. Now, something to keep in mind, there might be like somewhere around 1% on average on the table of performance that you could get by doing an actual motor ramp up test and making sure that you are like at that exact limit. But you'll be within 1% of somebody who's done that. So it's guaranteeing that you'll be in spec. It's pretty much guaranteeing that you'll be able to pass. The only exception to that is pilots who are running the Emax motors, because they're multi-strand motors. And so the variance in KV is, how big was it for those motors? It was pretty big.
So all of the other motors, the non-stranded motors, we basically found that we had to if we dropped their motor output limit by 5%, you would be totally safe and you'd be within 1 to 2% of the maximum that we've ever tested a set of 4 of those motors at. So Like the Brother Hobby Avenger, the one that we just set, is a 95% motor output limit. We have seen people able to run 96 or 97% by doing this test, by spinning the motors up and doing the average. But for the Eco 2s, to make sure that everyone who uses those motors is going to pass the test, we actually had to drop at 8%.
Right. Just to make sure, which means they're leaving much more on the table by using this.
It depends on what batch of motors that they have. Did they get the spicy batch of motors, or did they get the not spicy batch of motors? So even if you don't have our special spec tool because it hasn't come out yet, you can spin up the motors and still do a test. So I'll do a quick demo, but I'm not actually going to spin it because I got to be able to talk while I'm doing it. But what you would do is you'd go into your motors tab with a known voltage. You'd click I understand. You would set your master up, and then...
And don't do it that way if you have a normal power supply. So what you do is you click on that master to select it, and then you use the arrow key, and you hold down the up arrow key.
Yeah,
because
and you see how it rises.
Power supplies will trip if you use the mouse.
Yeah, so you'd spin this motor up. We have found going up to about 40% throttle is a really nice number. So up to where right here it says 1400. You spin the motor, and you're going to get some RPMs out right in this area, right? So what you can do is you take your screen capture tool and you screenshot over and over and over, like 4 screenshots is what we found be a good number. And you click your master and you hold the down arrow and you spin them down nice and slow. And now you have your 4 screenshots, and you have 4 sets of RPM feedback, and you got to do a little bit of math, and then you can find out what your individual motor output limit, which is basically a very rough version of what our spec tool does.
Yeah, so if you want to be a tryhard right now, this is how you would do that. You would take that 40%, do the math, figure out effectively what kV that is, and then you can try to get that to match the RPM that a 1250 kV would make, and an ideal 1250 kV. And then once you do that, you know it's a little bit of number crunching, and then you can set your motor output limit. But the easy way is just to check out the preset that Leadfingers was so kind as to make, and just drop that on there, and you'll definitely be spec within 1% for most pilots. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's our demo, unless we missed anything.
No, I think we got it, except for now I just realized that my quad's on the wrong preset now, so I actually have to go back and reflash to the correct one.
Oh yeah, I told you the wrong motors. Love it. Also, I realized in hindsight, somebody pointed out that I just didn't know what the preset. I was looking for an icon, and I was looking for the wrong icon, so I just totally missed it.
Whiff.
But come this Saturday, I'm sure I'll have your preset ready. So cool. So I think that's gonna be it for our live stream. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. This has been our State of the Spec update, and we're looking forward to doing some more Street League spec racing. If you're curious to learn more about our spec, a really great place to do it would be our Discord. You can find a link to it in the description of this video, as well as our website at streetleague.io, where we've got a new store that we're starting to spin up. So if you're looking for some products, that's a great place to look. Otherwise, go support one of the great brands that's been providing products for Street League. So thank you so much for joining us. I am Timothy Ichiasu, Sky FPV, and this is Leadfingers, Stephen Kanabe, and we'll be signing out for the night. Thanks for joining.
See you guys.